it will really make you believe in the resurrection. But, as we've already discussed, you don't need the shroud to be convinced of the resurrection. There's plenty of evidence. What are some of the pieces of evidence we've already talked about?
There's the 5 facts that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And that's the most important is the conversion of Paul.
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that Jesus died, and that the disciples proclaimed or believed that he was alive. Which that's a little subtle distinction between saying that he was definitely raised from the dead, but they believed.
They had experiences that they interpreted as the risen Jesus.
Exactly. And one of the points is the empty tomb, which is kind of the bonus point. If you've read the
like an Habermas, yeah.
So that's what I based a lot of this on. But so we're going to read 2 passages from John 20 that are going to relate to what we're going to talk about tonight. So the first is John 20. You're going to read verses 4 to 9.
Okay. Let's see. Both of them are running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first.
And so that's talking about the beloved disciple who was traditionally believed to be John.
And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth, which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw it and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead.
So there's the linen cloth, which is the shroud, sitting there. And then there's the head cloth, which we're going to get to at the end. That's going to be like our bonus.
Funny that he mentioned that he beat him in that race.
Yeah, that always makes me laugh.
It's hilarious to me. It's
but
such a man thing to
do. St. John, or the beloved disciple, believed when he saw what? The linen cloth.
Right.
And it may have been because he saw the image that we're going to talk about on there. Oh, what happened here?
It just goes, it's sleeping.
Kind of.
So, oh no, I don't want it to start yet. We'll go back to the beginning. So he may have seen the image, and that might have been what made him believe. Now, so he had that proof, but then we're going to contrast it in this chapter with somebody else who's known as doubting Thomas, and so we're going to talk about, well, what does Thomas demand? You read verses 24 to 28.
Now Thomas, called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came.
He was
the
a
other
twin,
disciple,
just like Max. He was a twin, just like Max and like you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
The other disciples therefore said to him, "We have seen the Lord." So he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And after 8 days his disciples were again inside, and Thomas with them. Jesus came, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, "Peace be to you." Then he said to Thomas, "Reach your finger here, and look at my hands, and reach your hand here, and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God."
Yeah, so actually Thomas, the doubting Thomas, he has the greatest proclamation of the full divinity of Christ in the whole New Testament. But what does Thomas demand?
Touch it.
He wants proof. And is it irrational of Thomas, considering what's happened the last couple of days, is it irrational of Thomas to demand proof?
No.
Now, what he should have accepted the testimony of his friends. But because of Thomas's doubts, we are even more assured of the resurrection. Because here's somebody that said, I need to see that it was physical and that it really happened. And so I contend that the shroud can be used, in a sense, for the modern skeptic. Because it is physical proof. It can be interpreted as physical proof. Now, the Christian faith, the belief in the resurrection, does not stand or fall upon the shroud. We're going to talk about that at the end. We're going to discuss that. But first, we're going to go over some of the cons, the arguments against the shroud, and there are only a couple of them. First is that before the year 3035, there was no undeniable historical mention of this cloth, which found its way to southern France. It just, in a sense, appeared, even though there are some bits of argument that can trace it other places. But this that we recognize as the Shroud of Turin first comes about, or is first known historically in the year 335. And actually the bishop at the time alleged that it was by a forger, but he doesn't give the forger's name. But then the contemporary pope discounted that opinion of the bishop. So there was disagreement even at the time. Some of our first historical mentions of it, there's disagreement one way or the other about whether it's legitimate or whether it's a forgery. Now the big sticking point is in 1988. There was a carbon dating of 3 pieces, which put it between 1260 and 1390. So of medieval, they proved that it was medieval, but their case is not nearly as shut and closed as you would think. It's going to get a lot more complicated, and we're going to talk about that later on. But so basically everything else, all the other evidence that we've learned about the Shroud or discoveries are on the pro side. There are even questions first about the carbon dating. These 3 laboratories, they were in Oxford and Zurich and Tucson, they all used pieces from the same small corner. And they all used the same method, which was an accelerator mass spectrometer. That's not going to be on the quiz, but basically they all used and identical instruments. So
They used a what?
And identical instruments. The
A
process that they
spectrometer?
used, an accelerator mass spectrometer is what they used. So basically they used the same area, like the same corner, and they used the same methods. So of course their findings would be identical. So it's not absolutely proven, the fact that they all came up. So they presented it as saying, oh, this proves that this thing is a fake. But what they should have done is taken pieces from different parts and used different ways to test it, and they didn't do that. And also,
Wasn't there also an argument that people in the medieval period had attempted to restore bits of torn fabric?
yeah, so it suffered fire damage at least twice, one in 1532, and at that time they doused it with water, and we're going to come back to that, remember that. And in 1997 was the other time. And actually that could have influenced it, at least the earlier one. But the corner that they used was where it had been held on a whole lot. There are ancient, or not ancient, but etchings of it when it's being shown, and it's being held right by that corner. So there was a lot of contamination on that corner. And in fact, one of the tests that they did, a couple of tests that they did sort of counter the findings. They found that the linen had lost all of the vanillin from its lignin. So that's part of the wood pulp, which that would date it to antiquity. But a linen produced around 1260 would have retained about 37% of its vanillin. So there's scientific indications that it's older. And also another scientist found that there was a coating upon the threads of the shroud that was formed by a mixture of bacteria and fungi, which are very rich in carbon-14. And that the cleansing agent used by the radiocarbon laboratories before the dating process does not neutralize those bacteria, but simply dissolves part of the cellulose from the flax. And so thereby, there's another case of increased contamination. Um, and there was something called the the Shroud of Turin project in 1978, and it becomes very important. And so they took tapes, they put tapes on the shroud and came up with particles, took samples. But actually, first I want to go back to 1898. That was when this guy, Secondo Pia, he discovered the face on the shroud, that it was a perfect negative, a photographic negative. So, and he was a photographer, he photographed it, and then when he was developing it, he realized, oh, that this thing is actually an inverse image. And so that's the kind of thing that a medieval forger never would have not had any idea how to produce. And I'm going to talk about the debris. I'm going to come
Wait,
to
so the
this.
picture we just saw, was that the negative or the inverse?
So that was the inverse, I think. That was the inverse.
So that's not the shroud,
That's actually the image of Jesus, yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And so I want to talk a little bit about the debris they found on the cloth. That it's got lots of pollen called halotypes, which are native to the desert regions surrounding the Jordan Valley, so right outside of Jerusalem, that is specifically adapted to live in the high salt soils of the Dead Sea. And these are plants that do not exist in the countries where the shroud is known to have been exposed to the open air, so in France and Italy. And so if the shroud were a forgery, this is one instance of this supposed forger being the most intelligent, most interesting man in the world, really. The fact that he could pull this off, this alleged forgery.
Could you press the up button on the remote so we can see the whole thing? It should
Okay,
make
so
it
I
go
did
away.
that. Oh, okay, yeah. You didn't go to college for nothing. Okay, this we're going to get to in a second. This is some of the 3D imaging. Haven't quite gotten to that yet, but I'll go back a little. And I go like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go like that. And then I pause it, but I go like that. But I want to pause it, and then, okay. There, okay. So, and then on the underside, so not the side that's got the image. So think of it, it's a great big long, it's about 12 feet, 12, 13 feet long. And so there's one side that's got the image, and the image is only on one side. And that would be the side that was next to the body. But the other image, so the back side as it was, that 50% of the pollen samples were covered with a thick calcium-rich mineral coating, which so that would have been from the slab in his sepulcher, and that was not the case with those from the other side, from the image side. So that side didn't get that mineral coating. And also their botanical products, which were used in ancient burial customs in order to delay the decay of the body and also to temper the odor of the body. And these particular methods were used in antiquity, so at the time of Jesus, but they had declined in use by the Middle Ages. So that's another instance where this alleged forger would have had to have an incredible knowledge of burial customs in first century Jerusalem. And then on the sole of the foot, I sent that link to the group me, and that's got a pretty good, where do I have it? I kind of pulled it up here on my magic machine. So here, this is, you kind of imagine the body there on the shroud. And so there's actually dirt on the foot part, on the sole of the foot, and especially at the heel. And it's dirt that matches what would have been in Jerusalem. And there's also dirt on the left knee and on the nose, which implies that when he fell, because he was holding it like this, he was not able to catch himself, because he was probably just carrying the cross beam of the cross, and he fell right on his nose. Again, why would a forger put that on there, that no one would discover? And there are particles of limestone on the shroud that are remarkably similar to the limestone taken from ancient tombs in Jerusalem. And again, as with the dirt, these samples are especially concentrated at the feet. Now, so the physical presence of the image, not the image itself, but kind of the tangible, what's left of the image. Okay, this image is physically present only upon the very surface of the topmost fibers and does not penetrate into the cloth itself. So the image doesn't go all the way through the cloth. It's just on the very, very, very top.
Means it couldn't have been painted.
Yeah.
And it would have seeped.
And this is going to blow your mind. It only penetrates less than 0.0 micrometers, which is 0.00028 of an inch, which is an amazing 1/30th of the diameter of one individual fiber from a single 200 fiber linen thread.
Wow.
So it's just the thinnest you can imagine. And in fact, the image does not exhibit any of the directionality of an artist's brush. So a painting, you can see which way the artist paints. And during those two fires in 1532 and 1997, there's no melting of the image, as there would be with paint. If it were paint, there would be some type of melting of the image. And there's no run or seepage of the alleged paint from the water that was used to douse it in 1532. And that would have happened if it had been painted. And no modern scientist has been able to reproduce the image physically as it exists on the shroud. And there was one Italian physicist who spent 5 years trying to replicate the image using ultraviolet light from state-of-the-art excimer lasers. But he was unable to reproduce all the various images. And he said that the ultraviolet light necessary to form the entire image exceeds the maximum power released by all ultraviolet light sources available today. So if you took all the ultraviolet light sources available today, you would not be able to produce this image. And it would require pulses having durations shorter than 1/40 billionth of a second and intensities on the order of several billion watts. So just imagine the energy that was released to create this image. And there was one professional photographer in the 1960s who used 2 projectors to beam dual negatives of the face on the plasticine, from which he molded a remarkably accurate 3D image. But he said that about the image of the quality of the image. He said, "I've been involved in the invention of many complicated visual processes, and I can tell you that no one could have faked that image. No one could do it today with all the technology we have." And still, that's 60 years ago, and still today, we can't figure out how to do it. He said it's a perfect negative. It has a photographic quality that is extremely precise. So, if we can't do it now, how could a medieval forger have done it? And, oh yes, this is getting to the next thing. This one guy, Dr. John Jackson, who worked for NASA, and he discovered this kind of effect right here. So that he used a VP8 image analyzer that was developed for NASA, and he discovered that image produced the true 3D effect, in which the monitor could move around the contours of the body. So you can see that's the 3D effect. You can see there is actually 3D image there in the shroud. And it's like the way that a helicopter can move around the contours of a mountain range. And in fact, no other item besides the Shroud of Turin has ever produced that sort of 3D image from this type of analyzer. And in the 1980s, another professor noticed that the finger bones and the teeth seem to appear as if they're under an X-ray. That's more information that's in there. And then in 2016, another couple of scientists using digital enhancements of the image ascertained that the intensity of the thumb of the right hand is higher than that of the background, but lower than that of the index and middle fingers. So the thumb is like this, and is comparable to that of the ring and little finger. So these two fingers are here, the thumb, and these are here. And this can be explained as meaning that the hand is not uniformly parallel to the cloth, but rather it's laying on the thigh with the index and middle fingers raised by the partially obscured thumb. Okay, now we're going to talk about the body and the blood. Okay, so although the image is only projected on the very surface of the cloth, the blood, this is something that really blows my mind. So the blood goes all the way through the cloth, from top to bottom. And in fact, it's clear that the blood was on the shroud, was on the fabric before the image was.
Mm-hmm.
So if the artist is doing that, that's incredibly complicated to do.
Wait, how? How do we do
Because he would have had to figure out where the blood's going to go and then paint the image on it. You mean, how did they figure that out?
that? I don't know if I follow. Like,
Okay, so one of the things they discovered is that the blood was there before the image.
how do they know that?
The blood goes all the way through. You have to accept it on faith. Because I don't know if I can entirely.
I guess what I'm asking, like, is the blood on the very small layer affected in some way by the light? Because that's what I would imagine that, like.
Well, I think they said since the blood goes all the way
All the way
through,
through,
but
yeah.
the image is only on the very surface.
But the image.
I wonder if there's a way to
Yeah.
tell if the image on the blood spots has been
Yeah, that's what I'm
affected.
asking.
Yeah, there's some
That's
way.
what I'm asking.
It blows my mind, but I mean, I've seen
That's
this several places in the scholarly.
The image would have appeared under the blood stains if you did it by mass spectronomy, according to Google.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, thank you. See, AI is good for something.
Yeah, some use.
AI is pro shroud.
And also, they know that it's AB blood, which is very rare generally, but it is very common in Palestinian Jews. So it matches the blood of that presumably would have been Jesus. Okay, and then also when they subjected it to X-rays, neither the body nor the blood stains appeared, indicating that either it was genuine blood, so blood is not picked up on an X-ray, so the blood was not, or it's some pigment with too low of an atomic weight to appear on the X-ray rather than typical paints of heavier things. So that's again is something that would have been unknown to a medieval person. And here's another thing about the blood, is that they analyzed the wavelength of the particles, and they figured out that that they contain denatured hemoglobin, which indicates that it's very old blood. It's like not recent blood, it's very old. So it's from the time of our Lord. Okay, so compared to the Raman spectrum of a microsubstance taken from a fiber of the shroud to numerous spectra from old or modern pigment dyes in blood cells, they found that the material taken from the shroud comes from blood. It's not comparable to various dyes, so it's not a dye. And there's one criticism that, the blood appears too red to be actual dried human blood, because dried human blood usually gets darker. But the trauma that's brought about by the scourging and the crucifixion would produce hemolysis, which is the breaking up the red blood corpuscles, in which the hemolyzed hemoglobin will almost immediately run through the liver and build up a very high bilirubin. So that's would result in this
In
redder blood.
This is so fantastic for me.
Yeah. So I don't understand half of what I'm talking about. But
I
you
do.
understand?
That's
Okay,
fantastic.
Yeah. And actually that's related to when they pierced his side and blood and water came out. I mean, that's scientifically there's an explanation for that, which I don't entirely understand.
Pericardial effusion.
But it has to do with the trauma.
Yes.
Yeah, that has to do with the trauma that he went through.
or my friend now.
So that results in a very red color of the blood, and that will not darken when it's congealed. And then, even more remarkably, they found that when testing for proteins, the fine fibers under the blood samples were untouched by the image of the body, indicating that this answers your question, indicating that the blood had been present upon the cloth before the physical image of the body.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Okay. When testing for proteins, they found that the fine fibers under the blood samples were untouched by the image of the body. So the image of the body then, indicating that the blood had been present upon the cloth before the physical image of the body. Okay, and additionally, the presence of blood implies that the body, this is interesting, was not washed before it was wrapped in the shroud. And that's in accordance with Hebrew customs as regards the victim of an execution. And also with the gospel account that Jesus was buried in haste before the Sabbath. Okay, now the image itself. Both sides of the face and the entirety of the body are evenly lit. Oh, no, I can't remember what